Welcome to Section 1, Module 1. Today, in Section 1.1, we are going to cover the concepts of opportunity cost and the PPF. Before we begin, I would like to give Professor Watson, who was my professor at Harvard University, credit for some of these slides. So, resources are scarce. Individuals have to make choices because resources are limited. A resource is anything that can be used to produce something else. A resource really is the same thing as the factors of production, which are land, which includes resources that come from nature, such as minerals and water. Labor is just the effort of workers. A company needs employees in order to function. Capital, which are the manufactured goods used to make other goods, such as machinery, iPads, computers. Entrepreneurship includes risk-taking, innovation, and it really just is the organizations of resources for production. So how well you can, combine land, labor, and capital to produce other things, such as like in an assembly line, for example. Now, let's say that in an 8-hour period, you can either create 8 websites right here, or you can spend all 8 hours producing 16 computer programs. And these are all the combinations you can pick between the two. So if we graph this, we would have to create a PPF. The production possibilities frontier just shows the relationship between the maximum production of one good for a given level of production of another good. So for that table, this would be the PPF. It just gives you all the possibilities of production, given that you want to produce computer programs or websites in an 8-hour period. Because in this situation, you only have 8 hours. Point C, for example, is unattainable. You only have 8 hours to produce, and when you work 8 hours, you cannot produce 14 websites. You can only produce 8. If you got better and you were able to produce more websites, let's say 16, then point C would be a point attainable in your PPF. Point A is not efficient because at point A you are producing 4 computer programs and you're producing 4 websites. But when you produce 4 computer programs, you could also be producing 8 websites. Or when you produce 4 websites, you could also be producing 8 computer programs. That's why points D and B are efficient, but point A is not, because you're not using all your resources. Another important concept that can be seen in the PPF is the concept of opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of something is what you must give up in order to get that something. And the opportunity cost really shows the real cost of things. For example, the real cost of watching TV is not just watching TV. It's what you could be doing with the time you're spending while watching TV. And in this case, for example, the opportunity cost of 2 websites. So in order to get 2 more websites, in order to produce 2 more websites, you must give up 4 computer programs. The opportunity cost is usually expressed in a ratio of 1 in the denominator. It's always going to be, the opportunity cost of a good over that good. So here we want to divide -4 by 2 to get the opportunity cost of 1 website. And when we do that, we're going to get -2 over 1, which is exactly the same value as the slope of the PPF. So really, the PPF shows you the opportunity cost, or the ratio of the opportunity cost for the good you have in the x-axis. You don't really need a PPF in order to get the opportunity cost of something. If you're giving, what you can produce, the number of goods or services you can produce, and the number of other goods and services that you could produce, given a certain amount of resources, in this case 8 hours, then you just need to put these 2 numbers in a ratio putting in the denominator the good for which you're trying to find the opportunity cost. So we know that the opportunity cost of one website, is going to be 2 computer programs for every additional website we create. And that's exactly what we have here. And this is exactly what we have in the table. I'm not putting the negative sign because it is implied that, with the name opportunity cost, that this is going to be a negative number. Once we have the opportunity cost for websites, we can actually also find the opportunity cost for computer programs. We just need to think about it logically. If you need to give up one website in order to get 2 computers, then in order to get 2 computers, you're going to have to get 1 website. And that's exactly what we have right here. I just put this ratio of good over the opportunity cost just to show you that it's the exact same thing we have here, just that we flipped it. This is the reciprocal. And when we simplify this, we get that the opportunity cost is going to be of one computer program going to be half of a website. And that's exactly what we have here as well. Now, not all the PPFs are constant. In fact, in real life, most of them aren't, and that's because the opportunity cost is always never constant. For example, in this case, when you produce your first orange, your opportunity cost, what you must give up in order to get it, is just going to be, less than an apple. But when you produce, your 10th orange from your 9th orange, so when you go from 9 to 10, you actually must give up a lot. In this case, you must give up about, 4 apples in order to get 1 more orange. And that is because you have a specific amount of resources designated for the production of apples, and another specific amount of resources designated for the production of oranges. So when you go from your 0 orange to your first orange, you have a lot of resources left for the production of oranges, and therefore you don't need to utilize any of the resources you've set apart for the production of apples, and therefore you must only give up, less than an apple in this case. But when you go from your 9th to your 10th orange, you're not going to have a lot of resources left for the production of oranges, and you're going to need, the resources you've put apart for the production of apples in order to get that 1 extra orange. Nevertheless, the resources you've set apart for the production of apples are not as good for the production of oranges, and therefore you're going to need a lot of those resources, which results in you giving up 4 apples because there's not going to be, any resources left for the production of those 4 apples. Lastly, remember, a point inside the curve means that you're not utilizing all the resources effectively. A point on the PPC or the PPF, which are exactly the same thing, just means that you are at that point using all resources effectively. And when you have a point outside the PPF or the PPC, it means that it's unattainable. For example, this point would be unattainable at that moment, given the resources. However, over time, you can expand your resources, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, and get economic growth. In that case, you're actually going to be able to produce more, for example, 10 oranges instead of 7, and about 7.5 apples instead of 6.5 apples. The opposite of economic growth would be a recession, and that's exactly what this point over here shows, because at that point you're not using all your resources effectively, which is what happens in a recession. For example, in the recession you have unemployment. You're not using all the resource of labor because there's unemployment. So given that you can only work 8 hours, and given it that you can only produce 16 programs in a day or 8 websites, you're going to need a total of 45 days of work in order to complete the goal, which in this case is 240 programs and 240 websites. So how could you decrease the amount of time and get the same amount of output, given that you have limited resources, in this case 8 hours? Well, the answer is going to be in trade, as we are going to find out in section 1, module 2. Good luck, and please go to section 1.2. Thank you for watching.